Hey everybody, Sam here, and today I want to talk to you about the history of vaudeville. If you've caught any of our other videos, you may remember me mentioning vaudeville in our puppet video. Well, Alicia pointed out that vaudeville actually isn't very well known outside of theater circles, and even then, sometimes not. So today I want to talk about what vaudeville was and why it mattered. So first, what it was. Vaudeville was a type of theater that was really popular from the 1880s to the early 1930s, meaning that it was around from around 10 years after the Civil War, all the way up until the Great Depression, which is a pretty long time. Britain had a similar movement called music hall revues, but vaudeville was uniquely North American, so of course we stole the term from the French and pronounced it entirely wrong. Historians think that the term came from a bastardization of Vaudeville, which means voice of the city, or Vaudeville, which is a region in France which is used in comedic songs. Either way, Americans took the term and made it our own. The easiest way to think about vaudeville is as the first popular variety shows. For a long time, most touring shows in traditional theaters were full-length only, and usually aimed only at the upper classes. Shakespeare. But shorter acts, and ones that were considered too risque, were relegated to bars and taverns. Tony Pastor, who was an ex-singing circus clown, is credited as the first to collect shorter acts and aim it at a more family-oriented crowd under the name vaudeville. Although vaudeville did retain some of its reputation for a more bawdy act. Eventually, vaudeville shows were performed in theaters across the nation. The shows themselves were made up of around 7 to 12 acts, or turns, under one bill. There were several circuits that would book individual acts or performers or groups of performers into shows. Anybody that could hold a crowd's attention for at least 3 minutes could perform. Acts range from magic segments, musical numbers, strongmen, dance numbers, acrobatics, juggling, comic routines, animal acts, celebrity cameos, appearances by people in the news, to, whatever this was. So let's talk about why all of this mattered. Gosh, I'm excited. So some of these acts were precursors and groundbreakers for acts that we have today. Male and female impersonators were popular, though this was not the first instance of cross-dressing on stage. Shakespeare. It was the first time that the performance was of gender itself. Instead of playing a character who happened to be a different gender for comedic effect, the acts were all about how masculine or feminine the performer could appear to be, framing gender itself as a performance. They could be considered the first drag performances, and the performers behind me were even performing in San Francisco. Vaudeville was also one of the first times that we had comedic monologues outside of plays. This developed into what we know as stand-up comedy. And vaudeville was responsible for building on an old clowning technique back from French commedia. This technique was back then known as the white clown and the Auguste clown, or Clown 1 and 2. This new interpretation of Clown 1 and 2 created a more talk-based version as opposed to the more physical version. And this was known as duo acts, the straight man and the comic, or, the more serious one and the goofy one. This is how we got George Burns and Gracie Allen, as well as Abbott and Costello. And it's probably why we have Key and Peele or Abby and Alana on Broad City today. Vaudeville also had the precursor to the music video, and this is before video even existed. So songwriters figured out that they could sell more sheet music if they got vaudeville performers to sing their songs, and they got even more sold if they put images behind the singers to support the song's story. So they would project a still image behind a singer and use multiple exposures to create a dissolve effect. It looked like this. Ooh, right? These were known as illustrated songs. The first one was called The Little Lost Child, but I'll let Kindle tell you more about the music of vaudeville a little later. Finally, vaudeville represented a notable moment in Black history since Vaudeville resulted in the first instances of black and white actors sharing the American stage. This is not to say that vaudeville didn't have its issues. The Theater Owners Booking Association, or TOBA, was sometimes given the nickname Tough on Black Actors. But it was the first time American black people were in front of white audiences as themselves, not a gross caricature of themselves. While some black actors chose to work within the system of vaudeville, others went on to own their own theaters and created their own lucrative vaudeville circuit by 1920. Vaudeville performances brought tappers like Bill Bojangles Robinson, the Nicholas Brothers, and Clayton Bates to fame, but I'll let Alicia tell you more about tap dance a little later. Other famous figures who got their start from vaudeville include the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Will Rogers, Bob Hope, Fanny Brice, who was the topic of the musical Funny Girl, Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire, Burns and Allen, Abbott and Costello, and Laurel and Hardy, but not working together. They had different partners. And that sort of brings us to the end of vaudeville. The reason that you recognize a lot of those names is that they successfully made the jump from vaudeville over to radio and movies. Technology was steadily improving throughout the time vaudeville was popular, so that eventually theaters were able to show short silent films with a live piano between all of their live performances. Then, as movies gained popularity and availability, some formerly vaudeville theaters began showing just movies. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, films were shiny and new. I mean, who needs the same old act someone took literal decades to perfect when this was happening? Second, the Great Depression made it so that many audiences could no longer afford a ticket. And why pay to go see a show if you get radio for free? In fact, why pay performers over and over to perform live when you can just pay them once and then film them and then sell tickets to that film? Seems cheap and economical. We performers are actually facing a similar issue today. It's hard to convince someone that they should watch your live stream when they have the entire internet at their fingers. I mean, our old edge used to be that we were live. But hey, vaudeville performers became movie stars, so who knows? Maybe something new and different will prevail. And that about does it. So today we plan to put on a vaudeville show for you, with a twist. We're going to show you the way things were, and then do it maybe with a little bit of a modern take.